Right now, which city and country are you in on this vast earth? Have you ever thought about how the place where you're spending most of your life might just be a tiny dot? So small compared to the vastness of this world? Humans have the ability to adapt and survive. If you could no longer live in your current environment, how far could your limits stretch? Can you imagine how terrifying a naturally formed basin valley filled with deadly toxic gas can be? What would it be like to live somewhere with temperatures reaching 56.7 degrees Celsius, or dropping to as low as minus 71.2 degrees Celsius? Where is the most haunted island in the world? And ultimately, what kind of places on Earth are considered forbidden zones? And you? Are you really sure that you're living in the safest and most peaceful place possible? Today, let's explore the top 9 forbidden zones on Earth. Today, we'll explore from various angles the 9 places considered the world's forbidden zones. Some of these locations were once inhabited in the past, and some are still home to people today. The dangers we're talking about today fall into 2 categories, one caused by extreme and hostile natural environments, and the other made incredibly dangerous due to human factors. And of course, at the end of the video, we'll also reveal the safest place on Earth, so stay tuned to see whether you might already be living in it. First, let's explore some places with extremely dangerous natural environments. Death Valley, USA, world record for highest temperature. The first place is Death Valley. When we mention Death Valley, most people immediately think of the one in the United States. But in fact, there are 2 locations in the world known as Death Valley, one in the US and one in Russia. Let's start with the American Death Valley, the one most people are familiar with. It's the lowest, driest, and hottest point in North America, sitting 86 meters below sea level. It's a desert, which means it's essentially a desert basin. So how hot does it get here? The highest temperature ever recorded on Earth was documented right here. On July 10, 1913, the temperature soared to 56.7 degrees Celsius, 134 degrees Fahrenheit. Although this record was set over 100 years ago, it doesn't mean the place has cooled down. It's still extremely hot to this day. In fact, the highest annual temperatures here are still close to that record. It's just that they haven't broken it. For example, last year's highest temperature reached 54.4 degrees Celsius, 129.9 degrees Fahrenheit. So what does 54 degrees Celsius feel like? It's similar to being inside a steam sauna. A typical sauna room has temperatures ranging from 60 to 80 degrees Celsius, but with very high humidity. The place we're talking about, however, is extremely dry. The feeling of dry heat and humid heat are completely different. In dry heat, people are much more likely to suffer from dehydration, so in such environments, people die from thirst and fluid loss. In contrast, in humid heat, like in tropical rainforests, people die from heat itself because the body can't sweat properly. So if you're heading into a desert, make sure to hydrate heavily, and if you're going into a rainforest, focus on cooling your body down. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next exciting adventures. Let's move on to the second forbidden zone in the world, Kamchatka's Death Valley in Russia, a naturally formed valley filled with hydrogen sulfide gas. Death Valley in the US may be extremely hot and terrifying, but compared to Russia's Death Valley, it's nothing. In fact, it could be called paradise. That's because in the US Death Valley, if you bring enough water, you can stay inside for several hours without major issues. But in Russia's Death Valley, surviving just 1 minute is already impressive. This deadly valley lies on the Kamchatka Peninsula in the far east of Russia. It's not hot at all. In fact, it's extremely cold. Inside this Death Valley, there's no vegetation whatsoever, and animal bones are scattered everywhere. That's because the valley is filled with naturally occurring toxic gas, hydrogen sulfide, H2S. H2S is a colorless gas with a foul smell, like rotten eggs. Just a small amount can be instantly lethal. Even at extremely low concentrations, inhaling or coming into contact with H2S can immediately cause eye burns or respiratory tract burns. It's absolutely terrifying. You may have smelled something similar to the toxic gas in Kamchatka's Death Valley, like the sulfuric scent near hot springs. However, it's not always hydrogen sulfide, H2S. Even large animals like bears and deer die instantly upon entering this area. As for humans, no one has ever returned alive. Most victims didn't enter on purpose. They were local residents out gathering mushrooms or fruit, who accidentally wandered in and never came back. This valley fully lives up to its name as a death zone. It spans a significant area, surrounded by 3 mountain walls, with only one narrow exit, which means the toxic gas remains trapped inside. It's precisely this closed terrain that prevents the deadly H2S gas from spreading beyond the valley. If it were to escape, the consequences could be devastating. This place stands as a harsh paradox, deadly by nature, yet miraculously contained by nature itself. In Russia, there is another extremely dangerous place, Oymyakon Village, located in Siberia, the coldest inhabited place on Earth. Oymyakon is in northeastern Siberia, right next to the Death Valley we just mentioned. Today, around 500 people live there. The coldest time of year is January, with an average temperature of -46 degrees Celsius. The recorded lowest temperature was on January 26, 1926, -71.2 degrees Celsius, and the unofficial record is said to be -77 degrees Celsius. Normally, when the weather is extremely bad, such as extreme cold or heavy snow, schools close, kindergartens close only at -48 degrees Celsius, and primary schools don't shut down until it reaches -54 degrees Celsius. Residents here mainly survive by hunting, fishing, and some raise moose, which are essentially the same as the reindeer from Santa Claus legends, and these animals can withstand the brutal cold of this region. In the village, cars are used to transport goods, but once a vehicle enters the area, it must not be allowed to stall. If it does, the engine can no longer restart. And it's not just cars. All electronic devices in this village stop functioning in the outdoors, such as phones and cameras. Even ballpoint pens and markers freeze up because the ink solidifies. That's why, for writing purposes, people in the village mainly use pencils. Going outside here is extremely dangerous. You have to cover every part of your body, leaving only your eyes exposed. Speaking of which, did you know that eyes are the most frost-resistant part of the human body? It makes sense, since for humans, our eyes are among the most essential organs, and without a certain level of cold resistance, survival here would be impossible. And now we move on to the next extremely harsh location, Cherrapunji, India, the wettest place on Earth. Cherrapunji sits at an elevation of 1,480 meters above sea level, with a population of around 10,000 people, which is not a small number. It holds the Guinness World Record for the most rainfall in a single month. In July 1861, the town recorded a staggering 9.3 meters of rainfall. Cherrapunji receives up to 24 meters of rainfall a year, which is 10 times more than in many other regions. That means during the monsoon season, all 10,000 residents are practically living in constant rain and drainage. So why do people still live there? The reason is that this land has been inhabited since ancient times, and generations have remained deeply connected to it. That's why it's referred to as the rain pole of the world. If there's a North and South Pole, then Cherrapunji is the rain pole. The massive rainfall here is caused by unique topography. Warm, humid air from the Indian Ocean gets pushed against the terrain like hitting a wall, causing non-stop rain. Due to the abundant rainfall, streams and rivers are everywhere. You only walk a few steps before having to cross a river, which explains why there are so many bridges in this area. However, wooden bridges are easily swept away by floods, and makeshift bridges built with light materials also don't last. They quickly rot or collapse. So how could people build a long-lasting bridge in a place that faces rain and flooding all year round? The ancient locals came up with a remarkably clever solution. They used tree roots to build bridges. They guided the roots, allowing them to tangle and stretch across to the opposite bank, forming a natural bridge. The advantage is that roots aren't swept away by water, and as they continue to grow, the bridge only becomes stronger over time. That's why the oldest bridge here is also the strongest. It was created 500 years ago and still stands firm today, a powerful symbol of human ingenuity and the strength of nature. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next exciting adventures. We now arrive at one of the most dangerous places on Earth, Mount Washington, USA, once known for having the fastest wind speed ever recorded. On April 12, 1934, winds near the summit reached 372 kilometers per hour, 103 meters per second, and were recorded in the Guinness World Records. Although the mountain stands at less than 2,000 meters, the wind is so intense that average summit temperatures drop to minus 40 degrees Celsius, and with wind chill, can feel like minus 60 degrees Celsius, comparable to conditions on Mount Everest. This record was later surpassed on April 10, 1996, when an automatic weather station in Australia recorded a wind gust of 408 kilometers per hour, or 113 meters per second, the strongest surface wind ever documented. However, that gust lasted only 3 seconds and was caused by a tropical cyclone. In contrast, Mount Washington experiences these fierce winds year-round, making it far more extreme and consistently hazardous. All the regions mentioned so far are natural danger zones, shaped by extreme environmental conditions that are inhospitable to human life. Still, some of them are home to communities that have adapted and endured over generations. That's why these places are considered forbidden zones for humanity, where survival demands complete resilience and adaptation to unforgiving nature. Next, we'll look at regions made dangerous due to human activities. First, the Bikini Atoll, Republic of the Marshall Islands, known for nuclear radiation. This is a ring-shaped atoll in the Pacific Ocean, belonging to the Republic of the Marshall Islands, a small island nation in the Pacific. The Republic of the Marshall Islands is quite unique. Although its land area is only 181 square kilometers, its maritime territory covers up to 2 million square kilometers, over 10,000 times larger than its land area. The country consists of 29 atolls, among which the most famous, and also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is the Bikini Atoll. It is also one of the most dangerous places in the world. The reason is that this island once belonged to the United States, which conducted 66 nuclear tests here. As a result, the area surrounding the Bikini Atoll still contains high levels of nuclear radiation that remain hazardous even today. Of course, before conducting nuclear tests, the U.S. relocated all the residents of the island to other nearby islands. That's why no one lives on Bikini Atoll today. Only a few plants and some animals remain. Interestingly, the flora and fauna have managed to survive fairly well, but humans are unable to safely approach the area. So why is it called Bikini? While most people associate bikini with a type of two-piece swimsuit, the truth is the island name came first, and the name of the bikini swimsuit was actually inspired by Bikini Atoll, not the other way around. Back then, when the U.S. conducted nuclear bomb tests at Bikini Atoll, it coincided with the release of the three-piece triangular bikini swimsuit. For people at that time, the design was a cultural and visual shock, much like a nuclear explosion in fashion. So the swimsuit was named Bikini, after the nuclear test site to reflect that impact. As for the word bikini in the island's name, in the local language, it means coconut. So the original meaning was simply Coconut Island, with no relation to fashion or nuclear weapons. Now let's explore the next forbidden zone, Gruinard Island, UK, contaminated with anthrax bacteria. The island was purchased from Scotland in 1942 by the British government for the purpose of conducting biological weapon experiments during World War II. At the time, the UK was preparing to develop an anthrax bomb, using a bacterium with an extremely high fatality rate. Anthrax lives naturally in soil and can infect grazing animals such as cattle and sheep. Once infected, their tissue turns black like coal, and they die rapidly. Although anthrax doesn't normally infect humans easily, during the war, Britain planned to weaponize it to target humans and carried out repeated experiments on this island. Eventually, the tests were abandoned, but the island was left heavily contaminated. The soil everywhere contained anthrax spores, making it uninhabitable for decades. In 1986, a special team was finally dispatched to decontaminate the island. Although the government later announced it was now safe, in reality, no one dares to go there. It's a shame, because the island is stunning, with lush green landscapes and clear waters, but it remains a permanent forbidden zone for humans. Now we arrive at the next forbidden zone, Poveglia Island, Venice, Italy, one of the eeriest islands in the world. When people mention global pandemics, the conversation often begins with the Black Death, which swept through Europe in the 14th century. Venice was the first city to invent the concept of quarantining for 40 days, the very origin of the term quarantine we use today. Poveglia Island became infamous because Venice used it to isolate infected individuals. Starting in the 14th century, whenever a plague struck, people were moved to the island for separation. Originally, it was a monastery, but about 100 years ago, it was converted into a psychiatric hospital. The hospital operated for about 40 years, then was mysteriously shut down, and no one has lived there since. Since the 18th century, the island has remained completely abandoned. In Italy, urban legends still circulate about ghosts seen drifting across the island, and as a result, no one dares to go near it. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next exciting adventures. Furthermore, in the 20th century, after the island was converted into a psychiatric hospital, some claimed that inhumane experiments were carried out on patients. As a result, many died unjustly. Later, the hospital director and several staff members reportedly went insane and died, adding even more mystery and horror to the island's reputation. The place is believed to be cursed, and no one dares to go near it. While the Italian government technically keeps it open, no boats are willing to approach. Interestingly, a famous film was inspired by this island, Shutter Island, 2010, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, is set against a backdrop eerily similar to Poveglia. Poveglia is even referred to as the most haunted island in the world and said to be a hotspot for wandering spirits. However, the Italian government is now trying to reverse the island's image, with plans to develop it into a luxury tourist destination, transforming the abandoned psychiatric hospital into a high-end hotel. The only question is, will anyone dare to stay there? And finally, the last forbidden zone on our list is probably the most famous of all. Area 51, a top-secret U.S. military base located in the Nevada desert. For many years, the U.S. government refused to acknowledge its existence, making the site all the more mysterious and intriguing. Even though the U.S. eventually confirmed Area 51's existence, that doesn't mean it's open to the public. In fact, no one is allowed near it. Aircraft, drones, and flying devices are strictly prohibited from entering its airspace, and even birds are said to be kept out. The base is located in a desert surrounded by mountains, making it completely hidden from outside view. However, if you're curious and want a peek, you can open Google and enter its coordinates to get a fairly clear satellite image. Since the government officially admitted Area 51's existence, many former workers have come forward claiming that the facility once conducted research on UFOs and extraterrestrials, and their testimonies remain chilling and fascinating to this day. From this perspective, if we look deeper, we'll discover many mysteries about the existence of alternate dimensions and the ways of life in other spaces or planets. These other realms may be completely different from the space we currently live in, meaning their methods of existence, technology, and perception of reality could be entirely distinct. For example, why are UFOs able to appear and disappear so suddenly, flying at inconceivable speeds? Think about it. Our aircraft today travel by crossing geographical distance to reach a destination. But if it's possible to transcend space-time, then moving from one location to another, no matter how far, could happen in the blink of an eye. If time allows in the future, we'll explore this topic further. For now, we've just explored 9 of the most famous forbidden zones in the world, places filled with mystery, danger, and the thin line between life and death. In fact, every year there is a ranking of the safest countries and territories in the world. This index is published by the Institute for Economics and Peace, IEP, an independent, non-partisan, non-profit think tank whose mission is to shift the world's focus toward peace as a positive, measurable, and achievable benchmark for human progress and well-being. The IEP primarily relies on 23 indicators to assess a country's level of safety and peace. For instance, whether the country has a civil war, is involved in international conflicts, or how many people have died from unusual causes, such as violence, terrorism, or conflict. In addition, the assessment includes relations with neighboring countries, political stability, whether the country has experienced terrorist attacks, the crime rate, the amount spent on military, and the types of crimes most common. In short, by compiling and analyzing these indicators, the IEP determines a country's overall safety rating. Even if we don't live in the most peaceful country or city in the world, at least we are not living in the least peaceful one either. That alone means we're doing pretty well. There's a famous quote from the butterfly effect worth reflecting on. The flap of a butterfly's wings may cause a hurricane thousands of miles away. Clearly, everything in this world is connected and influences one another, doesn't it? What do you think about this? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below the video. And that brings our sharing for today to a close. If you found this video helpful, Don't forget to share it with a friend so they can watch it too. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you again next time.